The impossible deal, the harsh fluorescent light flickered overhead as Victoria. Sterling watched her father's shoulders shake with silent sobs. Robert Sterling, once the proud owner of Sterling Construction, now sat buried in unpaid bills and broken dreams. "Dad, we'll figure something out," Victoria whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. The same words had been her mantra for months, ever since Cross Industries had stolen their biggest contract. Robert looked up with eyes that had aged decades in just 6 months. "Victoria, there's something I need to tell you," his voice cracked, as he reached for a legal document. "When we lost the Riverside project, I made desperate choices. I took loans against everything: the company, the house. We owed $3 million. If we don't pay by month's end, we lose it all." Victoria felt the world tilt. $3 million might as well have been $3 billion. She sank into the worn leather chair where she'd once drawn pictures as a child while her father worked late into the night. "There has to be something," she began, but stopped when the office door chimed. A man in an expensive suit entered Lucas's heart. Nathan Cross's right-hand man. Victoria recognized him from business magazines. "Mr. Sterling, Miss Sterling," Lucas said with a polite nod. "My employer would like to meet with you both today." Robert frowned. "Okay. If Cross wants to gloat, he can do it through lawyers." "This isn't about gloating, sir. Mr. Cross has a proposition that might benefit everyone involved." Victoria exchanged glances with her father. They had nothing left to lose. 20 minutes later, they sat in a black limousine that looked absurdly out of place on their industrial street. Inside, Nathan Cross waited, younger than Victoria had expected, with dark hair and steel-gray eyes that seemed to see everything. "Mr. Sterling, Miss Sterling," Nathan said, his voice controlled and calm. "Thank you for coming. I want to offer you complete debt forgiveness plus a profitable contract for the next decade." Victoria's heart skipped, but she remained skeptical. "What's the catch?" A slight smile played at Nathan's lips. "I need something money can't buy." His eyes fixed on Victoria. "I need a wife." The silence was deafening. Victoria stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Excuse me, wife?" Nathan repeated calmly. "For 1 year. A legal marriage to satisfy business requirements and family obligations." Victoria laughed, part hysteria, part disbelief. "You're insane practical," Nathan corrected. "My grandmother controls Cross Industries through a family trust. She's threatening to transfer control to my cousins unless I marry by my 33rd birthday, 6 months from now." Robert found his voice. "You want to marry my daughter for a business deal?" "I want to solve both our problems," Nathan said. "She saves her family's company. I maintain control of mine. 1 year, separate living arrangements, minimal public appearances. At the end, we divorce amicably, and Sterling Construction will never face financial hardship again." Victoria looked at her father, seeing hope and shame warring in his expression. This was insane, medieval, impossible, and yet. "Think about it," Nathan said, handing her a business card as the limousine stopped at their office. "But don't take too long. Your father's creditors won't wait forever." As Victoria climbed out, Nathan spoke once more. "Miss Sterling, for what? It's worth I researched you thoroughly. You're not someone I picked at random. You have qualities I respect: intelligence, integrity, and loyalty to family. This arrangement doesn't have to be unpleasant." That evening, Victoria sat in her tiny apartment, staring at Nathan's card while her roommate Emma paced in disbelief. "He wants to marry you to impress his grandmother?" Emma said for the 3rd time. "This sounds like a romance novel." "Not romantic," Victoria said firmly. "It's a cold, calculated business transaction." "But $3 million, ... Emma sat beside her. "That would save your dad's company, and then some." Victoria had been thinking the same thing. The money would pay the debts and give Sterling Construction the capital to compete again. Her father could retire with dignity instead of watching his life's work crumble. "What if he's lying?" Victoria asked. "What if this is some elaborate scheme?" Emma shook her head. "Nathan Cross doesn't need schemes. If he wanted to destroy Sterling Construction, he already has. This actually makes sense. He gets a wife who won't try to take half his fortune, and you save your family." Victoria walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Nathan Cross was probably making decisions that affected thousands of lives. And for some reason, he'd chosen her to solve his personal problem. 1 year, she murmured. I could do anything for 1 year. The next morning, Victoria stood outside Cross Industries headquarters, a gleaming tower that seemed to pierce the sky. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. The bank called. They're starting foreclosure proceedings. Sorry, sweetheart. Victoria closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Her mother had always said family came first, that the Sterling name meant something. If marrying Nathan Cross could preserve that legacy, maybe it was worth the sacrifice. She walked into the lobby with determination. I'm here to see Nathan Cross. Tell him Victoria Sterling has an answer. The contract. 20 minutes later, Victoria sat across from Nathan in his corner office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the entire city. He looked as composed as ever, but she caught a flicker of something nervousness. Anticipation when she walked in. I'll do it, she said without preamble. I'll marry you. But I have conditions. Nathan leaned back, studying her. I'm listening. First, this stays strictly business. No expectations of ... intimacy. Second, I keep my job at the gallery. I'm not going to be a trophy wife. Third, my father never knows the real reason. As far as he's concerned, we met and fell in love. Agreed, Nathan said without hesitation. Anything else? Victoria took a deep breath. I want to know why you chose me, the real reason. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Because when I researched you, I discovered you've been supporting your father's business for years. Working 2 jobs to help pay bills? You could have walked away, started fresh somewhere else, but you didn't. You stayed and fought for your family. He paused. I need someone who understands loyalty, Miss Sterling. In my world, that's rarer than you might think. Nathan called in his legal team, and within hours they'd drawn up a contract that was both a marriage agreement and a business deal. Victoria read every word, surprised by how fair the terms were. Nathan wasn't trying to control her life. He simply needed her to play a role. The wedding will be small, Nathan explained as she signed the papers. Just immediate family and close friends. My grandmother insists on certain traditions, but I'll keep it minimal. When? Victoria asked. 3 weeks from today. It gives us time for arrangements and for you to adjust to the idea. As Victoria signed her name on the final document, she wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or the smartest decision under the circumstances. Nathan extended his hand. Welcome to the Cross family, Victoria. I promise to make this as painless as possible. Victoria shook his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin and the strength in his grip. Let's just hope we both survive the year. Nathan. For the first time since she'd met him, Nathan's smile seemed genuine. I have a feeling we'll do more than just survive. 3 weeks later, Victoria stood in the bridal suite, hardly recognizing herself in the elegant ivory dress Nathan's grandmother had chosen. Emma bustled around, adjusting the veil. You look stunning, Vic. Like a real bride. I am a real bride, Victoria said quietly. It's the marriage that's fake. A soft knock interrupted them, and Margaret Cross entered, Nathan's grandmother. An elegant woman in her 70s, with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. My dear, Margaret said, approaching with a small velvet box. I wanted to give you this before the ceremony. It belonged to Nathan's mother. Inside was a delicate pearl bracelet, simple but clearly valuable.
Nice.
Victoria's hands trembled as Margaret fastened it around her wrist. Nathan's mother was a wonderful woman, Margaret continued. She married into our family for love, not money, and she brought humanity to a household that had forgotten what that meant. I hope you'll do the same. For my grandson. Victoria met Margaret's eyes in the mirror. There was something knowing in the older woman's gaze, as if she suspected this marriage was more complicated than it appeared. I'll do my best, Mrs. Cross. Call me Margaret, dear. We're family now. The ceremony was held in the garden of the Cross family estate, a sprawling property that spoke of old money and established power. Victoria walked down the aisle on her father's arm, seeing Nathan waiting at the altar in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. As they exchanged vows, carefully scripted words about love and commitment that felt strange on Victoria's tongue-she found herself studying Nathan's face. He played his part perfectly, looking every inch the devoted groom. But she caught moments when his mask slipped, when his eyes held something deeper than mere performance. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant announced. Nathan's hands were gentle as he cupped her face, his lips soft and warm against hers. It was supposed to be for show, but Victoria felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. When they broke apart, Nathan's eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Mrs. Cross," he said softly, and Victoria realized she'd never heard her new name spoken aloud before. The reception was elegant but small, exactly as Nathan had promised. Victoria found herself swept into conversations with business associates and distant relatives, playing the part of the happy bride. Nathan stayed close, his hand resting lightly on her back, a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. "You're doing beautifully," he murmured during a quiet moment between toasts. "So are you," Victoria replied. "You make a convincing couple. Perhaps more convincing than we intended," Nathan said, and Victoria caught something unreadable in his expression. As the evening wound down, Victoria realized the hardest part wasn't the performance, it was the growing awareness that Nathan Cross might not be the cold, calculating man she'd expected him to be. Living the lie 2 months into their marriage, Victoria had settled into an unexpected routine. Nathan had kept his word about separate living arrangements. She maintained her apartment while he stayed in his penthouse. They met for carefully orchestrated public appearances, charity galas, business dinners, family gatherings where they played the devoted couple. But it was the quiet moments that surprised her most. "You don't have to cook for me," Nathan said one evening, finding Victoria in his penthouse kitchen after a particularly long board meeting. She'd started staying over occasionally to maintain appearances, especially when Margaret made surprise visits. "I like cooking," Victoria replied, not looking up from the pasta she was stirring. "Besides, you looked exhausted when you came in." Nathan loosened his tie, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "My last assistant tried to manage my diet by ordering expensive takeout. You made homemade marinara sauce." "My mother's recipe," Victoria said softly. "Joey said food made with your own hands tastes like love." The kitchen fell quiet, except for the gentle bubbling of sauce. Nathan moved closer, close enough that Victoria could smell his cologne and feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Victoria," he said, his voice lower than usual, "I need to tell you something." She turned to face him, surprised by the intensity in his gray eyes. "What is it?" "Emergency board call." "I'm sorry, this will have to wait." Victoria watched him disappear into his study, wondering what he'd been about to say. These moments of almost intimacy had been happening more frequently, leaving her confused about the boundaries of their arrangement. The next morning brought an unwelcome surprise. Victoria was at the gallery where she worked when Emma burst in, holding a tabloid magazine. "Vic, you need to see this," Emma said, her face pale. The headline screamed, "Cross heirs marriage of convenience. Sources say billionaire's wife bought and paid for." Victoria's blood turned cold as she read the article. Someone had leaked details about Sterling Construction's financial troubles, Nathan's grandmother's marriage ultimatum, and suspicious timing of their whirlwind romance. The piece stopped just short of calling their marriage a sham, but the implications were clear. Her phone rang immediately. "Nathan." "Victoria, don't read too late," she said, her voice tight. "Nathan, this could ruin everything. If your grandmother sees this, ... double quotes she already has, she wants to meet with us tonight." That evening, Victoria sat in Margaret Cross's elegant living room, feeling like a defendant awaiting sentencing. Nathan sat beside her, his usual composure cracked with worry. Margaret entered carrying the tabloid, her expression unreadable. She set it on the coffee table between them and settled into her chair with the grace of a queen holding court. Margaret said finally, "This is quite interesting reading." Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. "Mrs. Cross, I can explain." Margaret held up a hand. "Can you, dear?" "Because I've been wondering for months about this sudden romance between my grandson and a woman he'd never mentioned before. The article suggests your family's construction company was facing bankruptcy around the time Nathan suddenly discovered love," her sharp blue eyes fixed on Victoria. "Is that accurate?" She looked at Nathan, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. "Yes," Victoria said quietly. "It's accurate, I see." Margaret was silent for a long moment. "And Nathan, you proposed this arrangement to satisfy my marriage requirement while solving Miss Sterling's family crisis." "Yes, grandmother." Margaret studied them both, her expression giving nothing away. Finally, she sighed and picked up her teacup. "You're both terrible liars," she said calmly. "But you're also both too honorable for your own good." Victoria blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry." Margaret smiled, the first genuine smile Victoria had seen from her. "My dear, I've been married and widowed twice. I've raised children and run businesses. I know what real affection looks like, and I've been watching you too." "Grandmother," Nathan began, but Margaret continued. "Nathan, you've been different these past months. Calmer, happier, you smile more. And Victoria, you could have demanded a prenup that set you up for life, but you insisted on terms that protected Nathan's interests above your own." Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks. "We had an agreement, yes, a business agreement that you've both been utterly failing to honor," Margaret said with amusement. "Do you really think I don't see the way you look at each other? The way Nathan finds excuses to touch your hand? The way Victoria's entire demeanor softens when he enters a room?" Victoria and Nathan exchanged glances, both looking stunned. Margaret stood, smoothing her skirt. "The tabloid story doesn't concern me. What concerns me is that you're both so focused on honoring the letter of your agreement that you're missing what's actually happening between you." She moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Nathan's mother started as an arranged marriage too. Sometimes the best love stories begin with the most practical foundations." After Margaret left, Victoria and Nathan sat in silence, the weight of her words settling between them. "Victoria," Nathan said finally, "what I was trying to tell you last night, Nathan, don't." Victoria stood abruptly. "We have 6 more months of this arrangement. Let's not complicate things by pretending there's something more than mutual convenience." But even as she said it, Victoria knew Margaret was right. Something had shifted between them, something that made their carefully constructed boundaries feel increasingly artificial. Nathan stood too, moving closer. "What if I don't want to pretend anymore?" Victoria's breath caught, but before she could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and felt her stomach drop. "It's my father," she said. "He never calls this late," unless she answered the call, her face growing pale as she listened. "What happened?" Nathan watched her face change from confusion to horror. "I'll be right there," Victoria said, ending the call with shaking hands. She looked at Nathan, tears threatening. "Someone sabotaged one of our construction sites. There was an accident. 2 workers are in the hospital, and the project is completely destroyed." "I'll drive you," Nathan said immediately, as they rushed to Sterling Construction. Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that someone was trying to destroy not just their marriage of convenience, but everything they'd both worked to protect. The truth revealed the construction site looked like a war zone. Twisted metal beams lay scattered across the ground, and the half-built structure had collapsed into rubble. Emergency vehicles with flashing lights cast eerie shadows across the destruction. Victoria found her father standing near the police tape, looking older than she'd ever seen him. His hands shook as he gestured toward the wreckage. "The supports were cut," Robert said, his voice hollow. "This wasn't an accident, Victoria. Someone deliberately sabotaged our site. Jake and Tommy were lucky to get out alive, but they're both in intensive care." Nathan approached, his face grim after speaking with the police detective. "The preliminary investigation suggests industrial sabotage. Someone with knowledge of construction would have needed access to do this kind of damage." Victoria felt sick. Who would do this, and why now? Her question was answered 2 hours later when Detective Martinez approached them with a tablet in his hands. "Mrs. Cross, we found something you need to see." On the screen was security footage from a camera across the street showing a figure in dark clothing entering the construction site near midnight. Person moved with purpose, knowing exactly where to go and what to do. "Can you enhance the image?" Nathan asked. The detective zoomed in, and Victoria gasped. Even in the grainy footage, she recognized the man's face. "That's Marcus Reeves," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He used to work for us. Dad fired him 6 months ago for drinking on the job. Robert nodded grimly. Marcus was bitter about being let go, but I never thought he'd go this far. There's more, Detective Martinez said. You traced his phone. Records he received several calls from a number registered to someone named David Cross. Nathan went very still. David is my cousin. One of the relatives trying to take control of Cross Industries. Pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. Victoria looked at Nathan, seeing her own realization reflected in his eyes. They're trying to destroy our marriage, she said. Yeah, the tabloid story, the sabotage, it's all connected. If they can prove our marriage is fake or create enough scandal, Margaret would be forced to transfer control to them, Nathan finished. And if Sterling Construction fails completely, you'd have no choice but to break our agreement. Robert looked between them, confusion clear on his face. What agreement? What are you talking about? Victoria felt her heart sink. In their shock. Over the sabotage, they'd revealed too much. She looked at her father's trusting face and knew she couldn't lie anymore. Dad, there's something I need to tell you about Nathan and me. 20 minutes later, Robert Sterling sat in stunned silence in the hospital waiting room, where they'd come to check on the injured workers. Victoria had told him everything: the arranged marriage, the business deal, the true reason behind their whirlwind romance. So you married him to save the company, Robert said finally. To save me. Dad, Victoria, how could you sacrifice yourself like this? Robert's voice broke. Your mother and I raised you to follow your heart, not to sell yourself to solve other people's problems. It's not like that, Victoria protested, but even as she said it, she realized how hollow the words sounded. Nathan, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. Mr. Sterling, if anyone is to blame, it's me. I put Victoria in an impossible position. Robert studied Nathan with eyes that had seen decades of business deals and empty promises. Did you? Or did you both find something neither of you expected? Before either could answer, Victoria's phone buzzed with a text message. The number was unknown, but the message made her blood run cold. Having marriage troubles? Meet me at the old Sterling Construction warehouse. At midnight, if you want to save your father's company and your husband's empire. Come alone, or both businesses burn. Nathan read the message over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. David, this ends tonight. You're not going alone, Nathan said, as they sat in his car outside the abandoned warehouse an hour before midnight. The message said to come alone, Victoria replied, checking her phone for the third time. I don't care what the message said. Not letting you walk into this trap by yourself. Victoria looked at Nathan, seeing something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Nathan, about what your grandmother said earlier, about us not being good at pretending she was right, Nathan said quietly. Victoria, these past months. This started as a business arrangement, but somewhere along the way it became something else. At least for me, Victoria's heart hammered. Nathan ... I know this complicates everything, Nathan continued. No, it's not what either of us planned. But I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just part of our deal. Victoria could respond. Headlights swept across their car. A black SUV pulled up to the warehouse, and they watched David Cross emerge with 2 other men. There's our answer about whether this is a trap, Nathan said grimly. Victoria made a decision. Nathan, I need you to know what started as an obligation became something real for me too. But right now, we need to focus on ending this. Nathan reached over and took her hand. Whatever happens in there, we face it together. No more lies. No more pretending. Victoria squeezed his hand. Together. They got out of the car and walked toward the warehouse, knowing that the next hour would determine not just the fate of their businesses, but the future of whatever they'd built between them. As they approached the entrance, Victoria realized that Margaret had been right about one thing sometimes. The most unexpected love stories began with the most practical foundations. Now they just had to survive long enough to see where this one would lead. The final gambit, the warehouse interior was dimly lit by a few hanging bulbs, casting long shadows between stacks of old construction equipment. David Cross stood in the center of the space with Marcus Reeves and another man Victoria didn't recognize. David smiled as they approached, a cold expression that held no warmth despite the family resemblance to Nathan. "Cousin David," said mockingly. "So good of you both to come, Mrs. Cross. Though I suppose that title won't last much longer. What do you want, David?" Nathan's voice was controlled, but Victoria could feel the tension radiating from him. "What I've always wanted control of Cross Industries. Grandmother's little marriage ultimatum was supposed to be impossible for you to meet. You were never the marrying type, Nathan. It's too cold, too calculating." David's eyes shifted to Victoria. "But then you found yourself a convenient bride with a sob story and a price tag." Victoria stepped forward. "You orchestrated the sabotage. You leaked the story to the tabloids. You've been trying to destroy both our families." Marcus Reeves laughed harshly. "Sterling Construction destroyed itself. All we did was give it a little push in the right direction. Well, 2 men are in the hospital because of that push," Victoria said, her anger flaring. "Collateral damage," David said dismissively. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to publicly admit your marriage is a sham. Nathan will step down from Cross Industries, and I'll take over. In return, I'll ensure Sterling Construction gets enough contracts to stay afloat." "And if we refuse?" Nathan asked. David nodded to his companion, who held up a thick folder. "Then tomorrow morning, every major news outlet gets detailed evidence of your marriage fraud. Bank records, email communications, witness testimony from disgruntled former employees. Your grandmother will have no choice but to transfer control to me, and Sterling Construction will be blacklisted from every major project in the state." Victoria felt the trap closing around them, even if they could prove David's involvement. In the sabotage, the damage to both their reputations would be irreversible. "You have 5 minutes to decide," David said, checking his expensive watch. Nathan and Victoria exchanged glances. In that moment, Victoria saw not the cold businessman she'd first met, but the man who'd held her when she cried about her father's company, who'd learned to make her mother's marinara sauce recipe, who'd sat with her in hospital waiting rooms and made her laugh despite their impossible situation. "We need to talk," Victoria said. "Privately." David gestured mockingly. "By all means, but don't take too long." Victoria pulled Nathan aside, speaking in low tones. "There's something I need to tell you, something that might change everything. Victoria, whatever it is, I love you," she said simply.
Not because of our arrangement.
"Not because you saved my father's company. I love you because you're honorable and kind, and because you've shown me that strength doesn't have to mean coldness." She took a shaky breath. "And if we're going down, I want you to know that." Nathan's eyes widened, and for a moment his composed mask completely fell away. "Victoria, Nathan. Victoria."
Ah!
A new voice cut through the warehouse. They turned to see Margaret Cross entering with Detective Martinez and 2 police officers. Behind them came Robert Sterling. David's confident expression faltered. "Grandmother, what are you doing here?" Margaret approached with the bearing of a woman who'd been commanding boardrooms since before David was born. "I'm stopping you from making the biggest mistake of your life." "David, did you really think I wouldn't investigate when my family was threatened?" Detective Martinez stepped forward. "David Cross, you're under arrest for conspiracy, sabotage, and extortion. We have recorded evidence of your communications with Mr. Reeves and documentation of your payments for the sabotage." As the police moved to arrest David and his accomplices, Margaret approached Nathan and Victoria. "I've been investigating David's activities for weeks," Margaret explained. "When the tabloid story appeared, I knew someone close to the family was involved. David always was too clever for his own good, but not clever enough to cover his digital tracks completely." Robert Sterling stepped forward, looking at his daughter with a mixture of pride and sadness. "Victoria Margaret told me everything. About the real reason you married Nathan. About what you've sacrificed for our family." Victoria felt tears threaten. "Dad, I'm sorry I lied to you." "No, sweetheart. Sorry I put you in a position where you felt you had to." Robert looked at Nathan. "Son, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer. Do you love my daughter?" Nathan didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir. More than I thought possible." And Victoria, setting aside the business arrangement, setting aside everything else, how do you feel about Nathan? Victoria looked at her husband. Seeing the man who'd become so much more than a business partner? I love him, Dad. Really love him. Margaret smiled. Then I suggest you to stop worrying about contracts and arrangements and focus on what matters. The business problems can be solved. Hearts are more fragile. 3 months later, Victoria stood in the same garden where she'd first married Nathan. But this time everything was different. They'd decided to renew their vows, not for business reasons or family obligations, but for love. The warehouse confrontation had ended David's schemes permanently. Cross Industries remained under Nathan's control, and Sterling Construction had received enough contracts to not only recover, but expand. The workers injured in the sabotage had made full recoveries and received substantial compensation. But more importantly, Nathan and Victoria had discovered that their marriage of convenience had become something neither had expected, a true partnership built on respect, trust, and love. As Nathan took her hands for their second set of wedding vows, Victoria realized that sometimes the most unexpected journeys led to exactly where you were meant to be. "A year ago, I married you for all the wrong reasons," Nathan said, was carrying across the garden to their gathered friends and family.
"Today I'm promising to love you for all the right ones."
Victoria smiled through happy tears. "Year ago, I thought I was saving my family's company. Today, I know I was actually finding my family's future." They kissed as husband and wife for the second time, but this time it was real in every way that mattered. Margaret dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "I always said the best love stories begin with the most practical foundations," she whispered to Robert Sterling, who was beaming with pride. As the celebration continued around them, Victoria and Nathan held each other close, knowing that their story, which had begun with an impossible deal between strangers, had become something beautiful. A love that neither money nor circumstances could have bought, but which had grown from the seeds of respect, loyalty, and two hearts learning to trust again. Their year of pretending was over. Their lifetime of loving had just begun.